Trump doesn't want us to see his medical records, even though he said we could. Trump doesn't want us to know anything about anything to do with him. That's why he constructs such crazy narratives about himself and his career, because it's nicer for him to live in a false reality than to acknowledge the fact that, well, for one, he lost the 2020 presidential election, or that he is losing the 2024 presidential election, or that he's not the smartest man in any room, or that he is not the pinnacle of health, neither mental nor physical, that he would like for us all to believe he is, despite what we can see with our own eyes. And not everyone is a shining paragon of health, but to be fair, not everyone claims to be. Trump does, though. He has a strongman image that he likes to portray, even if that means publicly sharing AI-generated or photoshopped images of himself looking ways he has never looked and engaging in behavior he has never engaged in. Here he is out in the mountains as some kind of rugged state trooper enforcing the law the way they did in the old days. What is he here, a border patrol agent? Does Trump know how to use that gun? The man does love a cowboy hat, though. Here he is with 6 fingers on one hand, praying in a church. Trump shared this one on social media himself. And we all remember this one. Here he is hanging out with black people. We know he doesn't hang out with black people. Who is he trying to fool? So after Trump's first assassination attempt, when he was nicked on the ear, he turned up at his next big public event, the Republican National Convention, with a giant bandage on his ear. For a bandage so big, it would imply a pretty significant wound, and significant wounds typically take a while to heal, especially for a guy who's pushing 80. But the ear seemed to heal very, very quickly, so quickly that it had people wondering how bad the graze really was. On top of that, being shot at would be a traumatic experience for anyone, but Trump likes to pretend he's above anything that people like himself would perceive as weakness. After the shooting, sources close to Trump reported he's been watching that 7-second clip of how close he was to getting shot right in the head over and over and over again. He may actually legit have PTSD. But PTSD, which would be a totally normal mental and physiological response for someone who's been shot at, is for weak people. It's not for Trump. After the shooting, Trump was examined by doctors, and as he's done so many times in the past, he bragged about how well he performed on the physical and cognitive exams. He said he got a perfect score for his physical health, and he said he aced the cognitive test, just like he aced very difficult cognitive tests in the past that turned out just to be dementia screenings. Here's what he said most recently: "I got everything right. One of the doctors said, I've never seen that before, where you get everything right. No, I have no problem. I'd go a step further. I think anybody that runs for president, whether they're 75 or 65 or 45, should take a cognitive test." I don't think very many people would argue with that last part, but if we're testing the cognition of our political candidates, shouldn't those results be made somewhat public? There's currently no requirement of political candidates to disclose medical records, but this is only a story because Trump promised to release his, and he still hasn't. He didn't in 2015 either. Back then, he was 10 years younger, but he just released a statement from his personal doctor where he said Trump would be the healthiest person ever elected to the presidency. Then he got COVID. Reports say his condition was far worse than Trump wanted anyone to know. They said that in the moment where he stood outside the White House and triumphantly pumped his fist in the air after having defeated this thing that had killed thousands of Americans on his watch, he was struggling to stand upright. Then he survived the first of 2 assassination attempts in which a bullet grazed his ear. Apart from the potential psychological effects of this, there could have been less obvious physical effects as well. According to Dr. David Rottinghaus from Butler Memorial Hospital, which is where Trump was treated after the shooting, he said anytime there is a high-velocity injury, particularly from a weapon and a gunshot, there is potential for significant damage. You have to be very meticulous and very diligent in the evaluation of even something that may appear to be minor. The Daily Beast also reports that trauma surgeon Dr. Kenji Ibana offered a more optimistic take on Trump's injury, saying that given Trump is walking, talking, campaigning, and doing things normally, it can be inferred that he didn't suffer from any major effects that could be caused by a gun wound to the ear, like bleeding between the skull and brain or ear bone damage. So the overall story here isn't necessarily that Trump won't release his medical records. Biden and Harris haven't either, and as I said, none of them are required to. The story is that he continues to insist that that he is something that he likely is not. And whenever he offers to deliver proof, he just never does. People should either stop taking his word for things or demand that he follows up with his own promises. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.
I have to say, as soon as I heard that this was being threatened, that I might not be able to see it if I wanted to, made me want to see it all the more. Do you think there's an element of that it could help with the publicity? And, you know, if Hollywood pitches it the right way, it could actually bring in the eyeballs.
Look, I think, Alex, you're totally right. If you see a poster on a building hoarding that says, The Apprentice, the movie Donald Trump doesn't want you to see. How many people do you think are going to want to go see that movie for obvious reasons?
Actor Sebastian Stan is playing Donald Trump in a new movie called The Apprentice, but Trump is trying to stop the film from being seen by the public. Some people have seen it, though. It's already received positive critical feedback from media journalists who saw the film at festivals like Cannes, Telluride, and Toronto. And the film is set to be released in theaters on October 11th, just a few weeks before Election Day.
Let's talk about the new movie, The Apprentice. It's a drama depiction of Donald Trump's early years as a New York real estate mogul. It's getting some pretty good reviews, but it does not always portray Donald Trump in a flattering light. And the Trump campaign, as you know, threatened to sue its filmmakers. Any updates, Dom, on where The Apprentice stands today and potential legal action?
Well, as is so often with Donald Trump and the Trump campaign, huff and puff, but they don't blow the house down. This was a threat. The threat was given a May 27th deadline. That deadline has come and gone.
It's not quite an October surprise because the movie isn't coming from either American political party. Also, I doubt any Trump supporters will go see this movie, so it's unlikely to sway their stance on him as a presidential candidate. The filmmaker isn't even American. Ali Abbasi is an Iranian-Danish filmmaker, and he currently lives in Copenhagen. He's made some Danish movies, he's made some Iranian movies. He made a Swedish movie called Border a few years ago. I actually saw that movie. It was crazy. I think it was good. It was certainly different. Maybe go see it. I don't know what you're into, but I don't know. It was an interesting movie. However, most people might recognize him from The Last of Us. He directed the last 2 episodes of the show's first season. When I first heard about this movie, I just assumed it would be an Adam McKay film, but admittedly that might just have been because Jeremy Strong is involved. Jeremy Strong plays opposite Stan's Donald Trump as Roy Cohn, the American lawyer who is perhaps best known for serving as Senator Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel during McCarthy's infamous Red Scare of the 1950s. He was also incredibly active during the Lavender Scare, which targeted and persecuted gay people in government, despite Cohn himself having been known to be gay. Cohn died in 1986 of AIDS, and up until his death, he insisted that he was actually dying of liver cancer because of the implications of AIDS at the time. However, in the 1970s, which is when the film takes place, Roy Cohn was the mentor, and Donald Trump was his apprentice. And fun fact, just to give you an idea of how truly skin-crawling this guy is, he was the inspiration for Mr. Burns on The Simpsons. So how did this guy get wrapped up with Trump? The answer will not surprise you. Trump and his father were being sued by the U.S. government for discriminating against black renters in their properties. With the help of Cohn, who was well known amongst the New York elite by that time, the Trumps countersued the Justice Department and settled the case. From this, Cohn began teaching Trump the ways of power, how to weaponize narcissism, how one should never apologize, how to attack when attacked, how to manipulate the media to your advantage, how to use fear to ensure loyalty, and more. Cohn has worked with members of the New York City mob. He has been a notable influence for people like Roger Stone. And speaking of loyalty, despite Cohn's name not really coming up very often anymore, when Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself from the investigation into Russian interference during the 2016 presidential election, Trump, according to reporting from the New York Times, quote, erupted in anger in front of numerous White House officials saying he needed his attorney general to protect him. At that point, Trump reportedly asked, "Where's my Roy Cohn?" A short teaser clip has just been released from the film. We can't show it to you here, but you can look it up and watch it for yourself. The scene shows Strong's Cohn in the back of a car with Stan's Trump, with Cohn coaching Trump through a call, advising him to be more grandiose, more hyperbolic, but still humble, sort of. In the clip, you see a young Trump struggling to grasp the cadence of exaggerated speaking that he has since become known for, but you can see how he morphed from what may have been a somewhat normal guy who happened to inherit millions of dollars from his family to whatever Trump is today. Between mentors like Cohn and his father, Donald never stood a chance, and perhaps he didn't want to. Perhaps Trump today is exactly who he always wanted to be. But if that is the case, he and his people don't seem to want you to know that. For one, billionaire and Trump supporter Dan Snyder, who indirectly helped to finance the film, tried to block it from coming out. Snyder, you might know, was once the owner of the Washington Commanders, formerly the Washington Redskins, and he was accused of everything from sexual harassment to workplace discrimination, so much so that the NFL ran their own special investigation into the allegations, and that's saying something. He was ultimately ousted from the NFL, but he was still able to sell the team for over $6 billion. Anyway, Snyder's stake in the film was bought out, so his efforts to block the film didn't get him very far. And according to reporting from the Daily Beast, Trump has said that he plans to sue the filmmakers. He's particularly upset about a scene in the film depicting Trump raping his first wife, Ivana Trump. The film also shows Trump, who is famously sober and doesn't know what cocaine is like, allegedly, indulging in amphetamines. And Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung told the Daily Beast, "We will be filing a lawsuit to address the blatantly false assertions from these pretend filmmakers. This garbage is pure fiction which sensationalizes lies that have long been debunked." Well, the movie is out there now, and it's getting Oscar buzz. Jeremy Strong is said to have given an Oscar-worthy performance as Roy Cohn, and honestly, I wouldn't expect any less from him. Will any of this have any impact on the November election, though? It's hard to say, and it would be hard to track something like that. This isn't the first time a groundbreaking movie has come out prior to an election either. There was the film Where's My Roy Cohn that came out in January of 2019, not immediately before an election, but it was out there. There was also Sacha Baron Cohen's Borat subsequent movie film that released in 2020 just before the election. Just a reminder, that was the movie that gave us Rudy Giuliani talking to an underage girl with his hands down his pants. But did people not vote for Trump because of that movie? Did Biden win in 2020 because of that movie? Who knows? And of course, this is a movie, it's not a documentary, and even with documentaries, you have to be careful of bias. What was included and why? What was left out and why? What are the motives driving the people involved in the project, etc., etc.? Movies can be inspired by true events, but the framing of those events is critical as far as how those events are received and understood. But I want to see the movie. I like both of those actors. They both tend to take on challenging and interesting and transformative roles, which is fun for me as an audience member. Ali Abbasi, as I said, I've only ever seen one of his other movies, and it was wild, so I'm curious to see what he does with a less fantastical premise.
This video further proves that Republicans don't care about the rights of anyone that does not agree with them.
Donald Trump had White House staff call the Disney Corporation to try and censor Jimmy Kimmel because the former president didn't like his jokes.
Trump himself used the power of the presidency not to push for more freedom of speech, which all of these anti-woke Republicans swear they care about. But instead, he used that power to restrict or try to restrict a business from saying what they wanted to. A Republican trying to control a business speech. In this case, you have Donald Trump using the presidency to call Disney, who owns ABC, to tell Jimmy Kimmel on his show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, to stop making fun of him. Imagine what this would have been like if a Democrat administration would have called Fox News to tell them to tell Sean Hannity to stop lying on their administration, which probably would have been true, knowing how Fox lies all the time, not by mistake, by design, to keep viewers and also relevancy with the Republican base. This is ridiculous, y'all.
Jimmy Kimmel has responded to this, saying that President Karen demanded to speak to my manager in order to censor my free speech through corporate ownership.
This is ridiculous, but the sad part about it is its roots are not just in Donald Trump or the current Republican Party. Its roots is about a Republican Party realizing that its racist ideas no longer appease to anyone other than white men for the most part.
I applaud you guys for going back 5 years, because we're going to find out that President Snowflake, through calling Twitter and calling Disney, was trying to hurt people's free speech because, it upset him. He didn't like being called names.
Just look at this incident. Just like this incident. Think about this. We scream about China and its use of business to monitor and control what information Chinese citizens receive, i.e. TikTok. Our own federal government has banned the use of TikTok from any federal employee on any federal device. But we pretend that Trump's behavior in this and so many other scenarios is any different than that of China. I guess America is always gonna America when it comes to its flexibility around white men's need to be victimized, as this country continues to grapple with the fact that we will never be a country designed only to benefit white men at the expense of everyone else. The Republican Party isn't just harming itself, it's also harming our democracy, because we can't function as a healthy democracy if we don't have at least two parties that are sane and productive. The Republican Party in this country isn't being sane. It isn't being rational. It's just being racist. It's just being sexist. It's just being anti-immigrant. All the things that America isn't or isn't supposed to be. If one reads the Constitution, if one reads the words on the Statue of Liberty, if one believed the principle behind the founding of this country. The President of the United States called Mickey Mouse about Jimmy Kimmel's joke with hopes that he would be able to censor Jimmy Kimmel's cracking jokes on him. I can't make this up. And if I did, you wouldn't believe it. The sad part about it is, as funny as it is, it's true and scary. And it's scary because a large swath of this country has accepted Donald Trump's behavior and Republicans who perform in this manner, regardless of whose rights they're trampling on. And that is the most anti-American thing I can think of.